The Last Word on Today FM.
With Irish Life.
It's World Parkinsons Awareness Day, and we've invited to join us on the programme a man who has the condition but who has spoken about it on a number of occasions and who's now involved in a new charity single for Move for Parkinson's, which is out today. Shay Healy, how are you?
Well, I'm not too bad, thanks, Matt, on this particularly important day for people with Parkinson's.
How long have you got the condition now?
I'm 10 years into it now, and I suppose for the first 3 years, you're on a bit of a honeymoon. But then the real implications of what's going on kind of kick in. And you realise that this is becoming an adversary, and you have to start managing yourself then against your Parkinson's to make sure that it doesn't possess you more than you deal with it.
What age are you now?
I was 70 2 weeks ago.
70? I wouldn't have thought you were 70. You don't look 70.
Thank you very much, Matt. Good lighting here.
Tell us, though, about Parkinson's. What does it do to you? How does it impact on your life?
Well, it's extraordinary in that every case is unique in terms of how it manifests itself. I have particular amounts of pain that in shoulders, arms, sometimes legs. I have a dodgy back, so in constant kind of pain in my back. You lose the sensitivity of your fingertips, so button flies become a thing of the past. And Velcro,
what about playing the guitar, which also would have been one favourite thing for you to do?
Unfortunately, I find it very hard to hold down the strings anymore. But so I got a piano, and I tinkered away on the piano. And music is one of the great virtues of dealing with Parkinson's. Apart from the fact that I go out to a lot of gigs and stay in contact that way. But there's a German neurologist who's just come up with the theory that set dancing is very good for Parkinson's. And there's actually a festival in Fecal coming up in a couple of months' time. Can
you explain why he thinks set dancing is very good for Parkinson's?
I'm not quite sure. I haven't read the theory yet. It may be to do with the configuration, the way it moves. They don't really know. They're guessing. There hasn't been a new Parkinson drug in 30 years. So,
why is that? Is there not a lot of research done into it? Because it is a major neurological condition, isn't it?
Very much so. After Alzheimer's, it's the second most common one in Ireland. There are 10,000 people with Parkinson's. And it may be environmental, who knows. It's not hereditary, but it does occur in families. And I suppose the biggest mystery of all is why it's so different in everybody. You're losing dopamine cells in the back of your brain, a place called substantia nigra, and they're not replaced. So we have to replace those with artificial dopamine, and so there are several tablets. And eventually they all mess with your head a little bit. And there's one spectacular one that the side effects of it can be very strange. You can become a compulsive shopper, a compulsive gambler, or you can be hypersexual. And
which one are you?
I had a bet I was going to be the other two. But and another spin-off from that same drug, the longer you're on it, I have hallucinations all the time. They're not big, scary hallucinations like acid trips or anything like that. But I see people all the time in far into my house, and as I go close, they dematerialise. Sometimes I go down the middle of the night and there'll be 4 people sitting on my couch. And there might be an exotic costume, there might be a soldier and a woman in crinoline and an old hag with a black shawl. And I have to kind of say, scat, you don't really exist. You're just a drug. And
how freaky is that for you?
Well, sometimes it's amusing rather than freaky, you know. I'm certainly not scared by it, but I don't drive at night now because it's possible that a guy would suddenly rise up out of the middle of the road about 20 yards in front of me.
And you would stop?
And I'd stop.
Even though there'd be no need to stop?
Yeah. And but I spoke to a woman today now. There was a march this morning. We marched to Stephen's Green and the Taoiseach. He planted a tree for us. And a woman came to me there and she said, you know, I'm really glad you spoke out because she said, I didn't know what was going on with the hallucinations. She said, I was so comforted to hear somebody else talking about it. She had a strange experience where there was a man came in and bent over her. She said he was so close she could smell his breath. And she said she had a small box with money in it on the side of the bed. And she was explaining this to somebody in one of the clinics. And they said, did they get much? She said, what do you mean did they get much? She said, it didn't happen. It was an hallucination. So in terms of awareness, I suppose this part of my mission is that if I have access to publicity, then to reassure people and make people around us aware, because a great part of the Parkinson thing is the caring that goes with it.
You mentioned the march today and you went to meet Taoiseach Enda Kenny, but how difficult do you find physical exertion now? How far are you able to walk for?
I'm not able to walk a great distance. Today would have been about my limit, and I felt my back now starting to twinge, which means I get about 400 or 500 yards, and that's been a bit of a pain in the arse because I walked and walked and walked, and I loved my walking. So I'm restricted in that way. I'm restricted in long travel because, again, you do stiffen up an awful lot with Parkinson's, and they have special drugs to counter that, but they don't always alleviate it totally. And the other thing that you probably hear it now in my voice, when I come under stress, like even being on with you under stress.
Oh, sure, hang on, this isn't stressful. You're so used to being on radio. You broadcast for so many years in RT. This is like coming into your natural skin, isn't it?
It is, but I find my voice getting a bit strangulated suddenly. And it's so odd. And yet, I did a couple of gigs last year just to see could I do it. And there's no interference with the singing and shouting and roaring.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely not. And not only that, but while I'm on stage singing, there is not an ounce of pain in my body. It all disappears.
Is that the adrenaline, perhaps,
I think
of
it must
being
be
on stage?
Yeah. I mean, dopamine is the pleasure drug, you know, and it's such a shame that you can't turn it around. But I think the biggest problem they have is that they can't get they haven't a carrier to bring the drugs right into the area where you're losing the dopamine cells, and they don't know why we're losing them. But I like to think I'm having as good a time as anybody else.
Well, have you ever felt bitter about it? Have you suffered in any way from depression over the last decade as a result of having to endure this deterioration?
No, I'm quite sanguine about it, and I'm reasonably level. I mean, I don't believe I'm going anywhere after here. I'm going to be a bit of stardust. I'm just going back into go into the incinerator and go out with the ashes. But it would be too easy to be bitter. It would be too easy to sit down and say, poor me, I can't do anything. So I've occupied myself as much as I can, keep my mind occupied. I'm writing all the time. I go out and play a bit when I can with my pals. And I'm generally involved in things that require brain power rather than manpower.
And the brain is fine?
And my brain is fine so far, yeah. I mean, a lot of people will say you have very odd opinions, but there you go.
You had those when you were in the full of your health, Shay, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about this charity single that you're releasing today.
Well, it's a very appropriate song, Something is So Side and Strong.
Something is so strong.
Now you see. It's very appropriate because the best thing we can do in terms of this Awareness Week is to be as strong a voice as possible and to be united in it, and to let people know that Parkinson doesn't have to be the end of your life. It could be part of your life. And that's for people who have it, and then for the people around them to understand what an extraordinary condition it is, that I don't ever go to bed with the confidence that I'm going to wake up in the morning feeling great, which is sometimes a bit of a burden, but more often than not, I watch Conan O'Brien and then I drift off to sleep.
And can you end up waking up in the morning feeling just absolutely rotten and know that the day ahead is physically going to be an enormous demand on you?
Absolutely. I get, on balance, I would say, about 5 good days and two days where I'd feel dodgy. But, you know, I look at other people and I see other people with other disabilities and you think, you're getting away all right. And people generally don't die from Parkinson's. They die with it. So I'm not anticipating keeling over or falling off my perch anyway any day soon.
I'm going to play the song to finish our interview, but I'm going to, before we get to the song, I want to play something else because I greatly enjoyed recently, and I was saying this to you just before we came on air, the Nighthawks retrospective that was on RT television recently, because you were the man who was the driving force behind the Nighthawks programme for 298 editions. It ran for between 1989 and 1993. We have one small clip we're going to play. This is the night that Eamon Dunphy and John Giles were partaking of a few bevies inside in the Nighthawks restaurant and bar.
This team has made history, and there's no such thing as a bad goal. And today was for generations of people in this country. This was the day for soccer, and it was a day for Jimmy McGee, Jack Charlton, Ireland.
You have a big
Opal.
There's something up here. I'll ask you to sing here tonight.
No.
Go on. Just
Shay can't sing. He's got a beautiful voice. Just sing "Que Sera."
Come on, here we go.
Que Sera, Sera.
Whatever will be. We're going to Italy. Que sera.
And an emotional Eamon Dunphy and John Giles following qualification for the World Cup. Of course, what will be. It was quite controversial, the 1990 World Cup for Dunphy after that.
Ireland O'Byrne took quite a drubbing in that interview as well. Can I just say, Matt, that the song can be downloaded from iTunes?
We'll get to that in a second, and I am going to give all the details of your Parkinson's song because we will play out in it. But just remind me, Nighthawks, how much fun was it going back and looking back over those 298 editions to get your hour-long retrospective?
It was extraordinary. It was certainly the happiest 4 years of my life, in that I was working at optimum. I always tell people that I have an education, part Reader's Digest and part Christian Brothers. And I was able to use all of my magpie scraps of information, and we got people in that would not be on any other show, especially musicians who wouldn't get a chance. And there was a great bunch of sneers working in that office. And it was a genuine collective in that. Everybody who had a suggestion could come forward, and we adopted. And
you brought a government down. You brought down Charles Hottie finally with the famous Sean Doherty interview in which he clarified certain issues in relation to phone tapping a decade earlier, and that was the final domino that pushed Charlie Hottie over the edge.
Absolutely. I sometimes think I may have been the blunt instrument by which he was clubbed to death, you know. I have a theory that the country western wing of Fianna Fáil spotted an opportunity in the most unlikely forum to air this matter one more time, and there was nothing pre-planned. It was just that Doherty had a whiff of cordite around him, and it was an obvious guess. And he said to me afterwards, he said, "In case you didn't notice, I said something I never said before. I said, I've noticed this anyway." So when I got back to town, I rang Bruce Arnold and I said, "Would you come and have a look at this tape?" And he came and looked, and he said, "Yeah, you just pulled the trigger." And that was it. And 2 days later, it was a shame when Charlie resigned, there was a strike in RTE, and there was only one camera.
I think that might have been RT's last strike. Okay, we'll finish up by playing something inside So Strong. You've done this with Niamh Kavanagh and the Garda Band and a Glór Gospel Choir.
Yeah. First of all, Niamh Kavanagh was so willing to do it. Really like to thank her. The Garda Band was an unusual choice, but they're a cracking band. The brass section is really, really good. And Lime Street Studios put themselves on the line as well, Stephen McGrath. And then the choir, I was telling him music is such a good thing for countering the down aspect of Parkinson. And the choir is giving a voice to people who wouldn't normally go out of their house at night, and they're going and they're enjoying rehearsals and they're enjoying singing. So it's all very positive, and any money from the record will go towards trying to get more nurses. There are only 19 neurologists in the whole of Ireland dealing with all the neurological problems. So we're badly understaffed. There are only 2 nurses. We could do with a lot more people.
Okay, it's on iTunes for just 99 cents. I didn't even get a chance to ask you about Eurovision and What's Another Year, but I know you're on with Anton Savage on Savage Sunday on Sunday, so I'm sure he'll ask you about that and the other things that I didn't get time to get to. So, Shay Healy, thank you for joining us on World Parkinsons Awareness Day. And here's a bit of Something Inside So Strong.
Keep up with The Last Word on todayfm.com, on Twitter and on Facebook.